Well, good afternoon, and welcome to this seminar brought to you by the Center for Bioengineering and Biotechnology, or CBB as I like to call it. I'm Shirley Fenton. I'm the Business Development Director for this center, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the seminar and to introduce our speaker. In introducing Cynthia Goh, she's just amazing. She has, if anything else that you will learn today, she is very, very passionate about what she does. She's a professor in the Department of Chemistry, the Munk School of Global Affairs, and the Institute of Optical Sciences at the University of Toronto. She's also the founder and director of the Impact Center at the University of Toronto. As a scientist, Dr. Goh works in nanotechnology, biomaterials, and biodiagnostics. She has a passion for translating scientific discovery to technology and products. And she's also so amazingly involved in training scientists and entrepreneurs. In addition to her scientific research, she has co-founded 6 companies. She's initiated a training program for entrepreneurs called Entrepreneurship 101 at the Mars Discovery District in Toronto and has thousands registered annually. In 2010, she introduced Techno, an intensive training program for scientists to build tech-based companies, which has led to the creation of over 100 startups based in university research. Dr. Goh will speak today for us on biosensors and nanomaterials, a scientist's journey from fundamental science to creating value to society. Please welcome Dr. Goh.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to have this chance to talk here. And I said that I could give this talk without my slides, because what I'm going to be primarily talking to you about is my story and my passion. And I'd like to say that please interrupt me if you want me to explain something further. Although I know that once I start talking, I just start talking and I get really, really excited. So you probably couldn't get a word in edgewise. But feel free to get your word in if you want to. But anyway, I wanted to talk about how I think about science these days. You know, as we all evolve through our careers, a lot of you are very young undergrads who are just starting on a research career. You probably don't think about what should be many years from now. And I started as a pure scientist. I love science. And I was asked somebody before why I did a PhD. And I said, when I was in 5th grade, I read a book about the universe and Dr. Einstein, and I fell in love with that universe. And I knew he had a PhD, so I had to have a PhD. I didn't know what it meant to have one. But as I got older, I started really realizing that the reason I value science so much is because I think it's really about the world around us. And that's the root of all the way I think about things in terms of creating value to society. There's many ways of creating value, but what I know how to do is science. And so this is why I'm very interested in technology as a path to creating value. So let me just start by talking a little bit about innovation. I know you've heard innovation as a big word everywhere these days. What does it really mean? Well, there are many different definitions, but we will stick by a general sense of innovation as taking knowledge to create benefits to society. We start with some knowledge, we create benefits, and who wouldn't want that? That's what we all want, right? And this is why there's a lot of interest in it. But I would like to speak about my own personal view about it. Why and how. So first is why. Why me as a researcher at the university? What I have to do with innovation? Because after all, there's many ways of innovating. You can innovate in your business practice. You can innovate in your backyard by changing how you do a little thing. In fact, if you go to a store, probably many of the products you see are products of innovation of people that are in their backyard, in their basement. But the university has a special place, I would argue, in that if you want to have truly game-changing products, in this day and age, you cannot do it by trial and error in your backyard. That is to say, I would like to argue that breakthrough science is needed to create game-changing products. And what do I mean by breakthrough science? So a lot of you have probably taken your basic quantum mechanics course in second year or first year physics. That's a breakthrough science, right? What's a game-changing product that came out of that? Yes? The laser. Wow, you read my slides. There you go. So in 1917, Albert Einstein wrote the equations for stimulated emission, as fundamental as you could ever think of. And yet, that gave rise to the laser. Now, what's a product of the laser, aside from, I do have a laser pointer here, I think, to, oops, not that one, right? So this is one of the things that we use lasers for. Not that one either. There, oh. Okay, you name a nice game-changing product that came out, that's a laser? Anybody want to think about, CDs, or the way you listen to music would be one of them. But the very first one changed the way we do grocery shopping. Okay, the barcode scanner. That's a game-changing product. It sounds so little, right? Because it's only about, scanning things in your grocery, but it changed how we do things. Okay, so you can, now I'd like to encourage you to think about various breakthroughs in science and what kind of product they led to. Or maybe do it the other way around. Think about what you see around you that wasn't there with your parents or grandparents or great-grandparents. And think of when the science was. I love thinking about quantized nuclear states, again, as esoteric as you could imagine, leading to the MRI imaging. But there are many things. Semiconductor physics changed the way we actually operate in every way. So anyway, so the argument for university research, it's because it will lead to anything that's completely new. You cannot do by randomly assembling magnets and electronics in your backyard. You cannot build an MRI machine. But these products take a long time. Science alone is not enough, and it takes a very long time. Just to take a look at how long. So just imagine the first barcode scanner came in 1974 based on Einstein's work in 1917. It's a long time, eh? Or think about something probably that people can relate to. The first MRI scanner in 1984, the first MRI imaging machine, when the theory and the first experiments on NMR was about 50 years earlier. So the challenge I like to issue my students is, look, 54 years to have something that is pretty much now a standard crucial element in disease diagnostic. If we could hasten that time by even 10%, if we can cut 5 years off there, the lives, the suffering, the impact could be immense. So I'm not even asking for an enormous amount of time to be cut, but by a little bit in there. And I'd like to argue that this is one reason we, scientists, we with strong technical background, should get involved in the process from the people doing fundamental science to actually creating the commercialized product. By commercialized product, I mean something that somebody else can operate outside of somebody's research lab. So that's one reason that I think one engages in innovation from a university perspective. The other reason I'd like to basically open up to you is partly personal. Like, you can look at the world, and you can see the world is full of problems. Look at the world, it's polluted, people are dying for all sorts of diseases, buildings are crumbling, plants are not there to yield good amount, or even something simple. Glass is not very nice and clean. And it could be a lot nicer, couldn't it? And science creating an impact by creating a much nicer, livable, more livable world. And the reason I chose these examples is, maybe you'll see later in my video, our student companies are working on all of these aspects. What I'd like you to see is, look at the world around you, look at the problems, and think think of it as not just a problem, but as an opportunity to do something better and to make impact. I mean, personally, I'm from a remote island in the tropics. My family still lives in that remote island. We get a lot of tourists, and this is how they see our island. It's a beautiful paradise. Nice oceans, beautiful jungles. But I see it differently. I see mosquitoes in all those water. You see the houses that get blown away by the storm, throwing garbage into the sea. People inhaling smoke because that's how they cook. Again, I see opportunity. And one of my passions is about actually understanding how we can build technology, how we can rely on technology to improve the quality of life in places like where I come from. Okay, so I'm going to talk about innovation as the path from knowledge to society. And as I said, there's innovation in general. I only know about science. I don't know anything about how to make business innovation. But science is the product of what we do in our research labs. What benefits society is something that people can really apply. And so the path has many steps, because this knowledge has to be turned into a technology. And the technology has to be turned into a product. And I hope we can see what the differences are. Product or service is what the world uses. Okay? So I'd like to argue to many people, including government, that this is very important. The fundamental science that our universities are famous for is the basis of that rest of the path. This is important. But what we're missing is training people to do this part so that we can hasten the migration of knowledge from the basics to something the world could benefit from. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of science. You know, I hope that you've invited me here to do a little bit of scientific talk as well, and tell you a little bit about my research. My research interest, I'm a chemist by training, and I'm interested in the fundamental problem of chemistry, structure-property relationship. Except that what I'm interested in are very large molecules to form very complex functional structures. On the way, I've studied a lot of physics, and I do optics, I do nanotechnology before it was actually a popular thing to do. And I'm designated as a physical chemist, so we look at tools to study this fundamental problem. So from the biomaterials perspective, this is an example of the kind of work we do. We are interested in collagen, which is a very important protein, the most important protein, structural protein in the animal kingdom. The molecule itself has more than 3,000 amino acids. It's a very big molecule, but it's the basis of your tendon, ligament, skin, bone. All the structure of an animal has collagen as, in it. And so in the laboratory, we study the interactions of monomers to form interesting structure with properties that are different. We're particularly interested in mechanical properties and in creating various assemblies that could be useful either in building structures or in designing structures on which cells and other matter could grow. Okay, so now we do imaging. So I've been doing atomic force microscopy from the very first days of AFM as a way of looking at the nanoscale. But one of the things that's really interesting is actually measuring the interaction. How does this protein interact with another protein? Now, those of you who are familiar with AFM know that you can suspend one molecule on a tip and pull things. But that's a single molecule experiment. In general, when you have a test tube, you don't have single molecules. You would like to study the interaction of biomolecules. And so we actually built a way of measuring interactions, because it didn't exist, this experiment. So here's a very simple way of doing it that we built in the lab. If you have a pattern on a surface that's of the right periodicity, you can shine a little laser beam on it, and you get diffraction. This is first-year physics. You get a diffraction pattern. And you get a signal if you're sitting, put your detector in one of the spots. And if you now make that pattern more intense by adding something that goes on the pattern, then you get an increase in signal. And you can even track the kinetics. Now you put in another one, and you can get another increase in signal. And you can even measure that increase with time. So that gives you some kinetic information. Or you can change the surrounding. You can change the fluid and get a decrease in signal. So once you interpret those curves, you can get information about the strength of interaction, the kinetics, and the thermodynamics of the two molecules interacting. Right? This is pretty simple. And it's even very simple to implement. This is a laser pointer, although this one actually is a green laser because I wanted to show it better. It's a green laser, but it could be a laser pointer. This is the fluid cell. It has two pieces of a glass slide, one of which has the pattern. And here's a detector. In this case, I think we have a camera in there, just a simple webcam. So that's the experiment. Now, measuring interaction is a very fundamental work, but it also has strong applications. Because now if you think about diagnosing diseases, you can really imagine that if I have an antibody in my blood, and I have the partner antigen on my substrate, I can detect the antibody. So in fact, here's one of the assays just to show you how it actually works. This is an assay for digoxin, which is just a biomolecule, just happens to be the one that I have lying around. And you can see that just the intensity as a function of time. Here's what happens when you have 200 micrograms per mil in the medium, and you can go all the way to 200 nanograms per mil. You can expand that graph to show that there's still a nice signal, and you can even track the kinetics. Now, if you put in a secondary element to make the signal be higher, you can go down to 2 nanograms per mil. And if we put in another secondary, in this case it's called a precipitation assay. This is an enzyme that catalyzes the precipitation of TMB. You can go down to 50 picograms per mil. So you see, with this very simple laser pointer and a webcam, we can assay something that has a concentration of 200 micrograms per mil all the way to 50 picograms per mil. It's a very nice assay for a very, very inexpensive machine. I have a laser pointer and a webcam. The rest of the elements there are just pieces of mirrors just to make sure that we don't have a gigantic instrument in our lab. Or one of the things I've been really passionate about is detecting TB. And here's how it works with detecting TB. This is tuberculosis assay for 2 different antigens in TB. One is a protein that's 16 kilodaltons, another one is 38 kilodaltons. And all I'm showing in this graph, and I don't want to do the details unless somebody wants to learn more, is that you can assay for 2 different things at the same time, because one of the antibodies is in one pattern, the other antibody is in another pattern. And all you're looking at is 2 different diffraction spots. So when binding occurs with one, you have the signal. For the other, you get another signal. So you can do what's called multiplex. And you can basically do many different antibodies this way. So this is very nice. We published a couple of papers in the subject. And I'm not really in the biosensing business. I was really developing this to look at interactions. Right? So what's the next step forward? And the question that people asked me at that time is that, why did I commercialize this? You know, and this is many years ago when commercialization was considered a negative word. They said, you know, you used to be a decent scientist. Now you're just talking money. And it was like considered not very positive. So why commercialize? And I'd like to show you that without a commercial instrument, I showed you the picture, right? I can do that experiment. I can build that instrument in half an hour. I can teach an undergraduate to build that instrument in 2 hours and to run it. But then what do I do? Well, I can publish 100 papers. Actually, I can publish 1,000 papers. By just every protein, every DNA. We show that we can work with DNA. We show we can detect cells. We show many things. But I'm a physical chemist. What do I know about what should be detected? Well, so let me just say what we did. That was now, gosh, it's a long time. Time flies, right? In 1999, and this is the little instrument. I told you we have 2 pieces of glass slide and a double-sided sticky tape. That was what we called our microfluidic channel. It takes about 20 to 50 microliters to actually run an assay. At this point, I raised money to actually commercialize this whole thing. Why? Well, I was naive. I thought, I really want to build this instrument because I would like to have an instrument to detect diseases where I came from. Remember that I showed you, where there's mosquitoes, there's malaria, there's TB. That's what I wanted. What I didn't realize is once you take money from somebody, you don't have control. But we can talk about that later. Right? But I took money in order to build something that's not this. Because this instrument, just imagine if you have to give this to a hospital and they look at it and say, what the heck? You can twist this around and get different results and you have wires coming out of it. So we needed an instrument that somebody can use. That's not us. This is the instrument that went to market. And this is the consumable. It's not something that's taped together anymore. It's a nice little plastic piece that cost us a lot to build the first one because it has to be nice optical quality. But once we got that figured out, each one is just 1 cent or less than a cent to produce. Okay? And this is a machine where you can put a drop of blood, you stick it in there, and it works. That's what we mean by a commercial instrument. The path was quite long because particularly when you're in medical diagnostics, because you have to be very careful about certain things. Okay? We had to build a first prototype to understand all the uncertainties. Then we had to build a machine that somebody can really test out, the beta instrument, before we went to market. And this right now is an instrument that is in the market. The very first person that actually used this outside of my lab is Dr. Rachel Berger from Pittsburgh Medical Center, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. I believe this is the first set of data they took on looking at a marker for traumatic brain injury, specifically in children. This is called shaken baby syndrome. And they're looking for neuron-specific enolase. Now, when you have a baby, you cannot take that much blood. So she was very interested in that we can do the assay in 10 microliters of blood. So this actually went all the way to clinical trials, and I don't know what the current state of this now. But the point I wanted to make here is that I didn't even know there was an issue on traumatic brain injury. I never would have thought about neuron-specific enolase. I was just a simple physical chemist, remember? In fact, all the experiments we did, I used to joke that this is the research by the Sigma catalog. You go to Sigma and you see what you can buy, and that's what you put in your experiment. Right? Never would have occurred to me to do this, and anyway, I wouldn't have been able to access it. But by building an instrument that somebody else can use, which I call the commercializable instrument or the product, that means I've empowered somebody else to actually really create value to the world. Okay? So it's not about making money, it's about creating value. Now, of course, I'm idealistic enough to believe that if you create value, you will make money. Maybe not as much as if you only thought about money. Because if you only thought about money, there are many ways of making money that are not creating value. Anyway, and there's many other examples now of using this instrument. For example, this is a detection related to cardiac markers. But the point that I wanted to basically talk to you, to emphasize in this part, is commercialization, which is the path from technology to market, is what enabled societal benefits. What hampers or what lengthens the process is when nobody actively takes anything. You can create wonderful research results, and this is coming now from my personal experience. The first probably 8 to 10 years of my academic career, I published papers. They were highly cited, but there was something missing because I was not seeing my papers, my knowledge being used in the world. Then I realized, well, of course, because the people reading my papers are people like me who really are interested in fundamental science and publish more papers, but they were not creating products. And so I decided to create a product myself. And this is the very first company that we had built, Excella. And they're still in existence. They actually have two other products now, and they're creating diagnostics for the world. Now, diagnostics is a hard place to enter. As I said earlier, I lost control of the technology because I took investment really early. And because I know nothing about the world then. I was just a professor, right? I knew about science. Somebody offers me money, I said, sure, that's great. I didn't realize there were strings attached. But the investors for the company are only interested in North America, Europe, and a few other developed countries. So they let me go and use the same technology to develop products for the developing world. So right now we have a couple of projects looking at drug-resistant bacteria and being able to detect them in a very inexpensive way. And hopefully that will be successful in the next little while. So anyway, people say, well, then you didn't get anything from this company. I mean, you didn't make any money. I said, well, a few things that I got. One is the satisfaction that I made an impact in the world. Or, so one of my colleagues, my partner in this, said, you know, think of yourself like Picasso. You painted something beautiful, we can admire it. We never made money of it, but you know, we admire it. But for me, it is my education. It really changed how I looked at things. And secondly, this company has been funding my research for the past 15 years and will probably continue to do so all the time, because they value that I'm creating knowledge that is useful to them. And because of that, I had research money to do things that agencies would not fund me. So that led to the second company. You know, we were not in the business of making nanoparticles, but because I have some research money, I can play around with something very fundamental, which is the idea that if I have a very large charged particle, I can control its conformation in solution by just playing with the conditions in solution. This is very simple. You take this polyacrylic acid in water or polyacrylate, you add a counterion, and that polymer will collapse if you choose the conditions right. Then we cross-link it with light, and you trap the ions. Well, there's ions inside you can do some chemistry with. You can reduce them, so now I can make, say, silver nanoparticles just by reducing the silver ions. Or if put in sulfur ions, if these are cadmium ions, I can make quantum dots with practically nothing. This is like in water. And not only that, because there are carboxylic acid groups on the end, I can actually modify the outside to make it compatible with the surrounding. So we did a lot of fundamental science to understand the control of conformation in solution. But the first application that my students decided to build is just, you know, this is about 2007 when quantum dots was a pretty big thing. I don't know if you've ever bought quantum dots. Anybody bought quantum dots? They're expensive, very expensive. This process, first time my students make it, said, you know, make a lot of it. They made this much. And they say, we're rich, we're rich. You know how much quantum dots cost? That was millions of dollars worth in that bucket. So let me show you the quantum dots. They're beautiful, and we can make them in the buckets. And they actually built a company thinking about it that way. They even got grants funded in that direction. Of course, fortunately, they thought again, and they realized that that one bucket load will probably satisfy the world's need for quantum dots. and that was it. And I'm not allowed to tell you how much that bucket load is because, you know, it would have killed their business right away. But, you know, at that time, I was trying to teach students to understand the process of entrepreneurship. And we looked at, we know the science. We have a technology to make nanoparticles. The question is understanding what should the product look like. And we spent some time playing around with this group of 5 students and me to understand where the value is and how to create value. So the company now is called Vive Crop Protection. Their big value is actually the delivery of pesticides in an eco-friendly fashion. Those little nanoparticles, the way we collapse them and so on, they can actually encapsulate pesticides, and for some reason it goes to the leaves instead of the water system. So they're much more efficient than any existing delivery system. And I think they've gotten product registration. They're launching their products and so on. They have over 35 people now in the company, a lot of them high-value jobs, mostly PhDs or engineers. Okay. So that was company number 2. And this is really the model that I worked with when I tried to understand how to train students to become entrepreneurs. This is the group. There's only one person who worked in the lab, really. Jordan Dinglasan, this is his project. I guess Jane is an organic chemist who actually did a lot of the advising on the synthesis. But the key person is Darren Anderson, who did not work on this. He was a guy on the Collagen project. But he loved dealing with people and creating the business plan. So he was the acting president for the company. For years, for maybe 2 years, he raised the initial funding. And then we brought in somebody who partnered with us and put in money and so on, who is now the CEO of the company. Darren stayed as the chief technical officer. Jordan is their head scientist. These guys came back to my lab, and they're still creating. They're now partners in all the other companies I built. And this guy went on to medical school. The reason I'm saying this is basically for you to understand that it takes more than one person usually to build a company, because there's a lot of work to do. And for all these people, this is part-time job. I mean, only Jordan was really doing research in here. Everybody was contributing their times as extra time. And we had a lot of work to do, so we need many people. But the important thing is we all sat down. I sat them all down to say, what do you want out of this? We have to make sure our goals are aligned. We see things eye to eye. We have the same values. Because one day, if there comes to be money in the company, or even grants coming in, we have to really pull in the same direction. So when we have teams coming to us about wanting to build companies, I always ask people, who are your friends? Do you have friends who will work with you? Who you see directions in? Now mind, sometimes the team comes later, but always understand that people have to have the same values and the same picture and the same expectations. Okay, so Vive Crop Protection is our nanotech company. This is actually a platform way of doing making nanoparticles, now applied to pesticide delivery system. Now they have a lot of IP that we are still trying to use for other products. So anyway, after these 2 examples, I develop a lot of training program for students, but I also am going through, every few years, every 5 years maybe, I go through a midlife crisis. Try to think about, okay, now what am I really doing? Why am I here? Because I really said, when I first started my academic career, I said, if it's not fun anymore, I'm not going to stay, because life's too short to not have fun, right? So life's too short to not have passion. So the passion for me is about bringing science to society. I love science still. I told you that I fell in love with science when I was in 5th grade, and I still love the discovery process. But I realized that, as I said, the benefits to the world is way down the road. And for the first 10 years of my career was spent here. The next 5 or so years was spent doing both this and that separately. But now I realize that really what I'm passionate about is doing research from beginning to the end. And that's what we have at the Impact Center. Oops, what happened to? It's missing that slide. Anyway, at the Impact Center, we take discoveries from research to the market. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we do that, just briefly. But for those who are interested in the research part, I'd just like to say that my current projects all have to do with starting from the fundamental. As I told you that we created a way of making nanoparticles. It could work for anything that I have a positive ion for and a negative ion to precipitate with, or sometimes several ions together. So what we have is a way of facilitating the study of nanoscience. Because one of the problems sometimes is studying the properties at the nanoscale is how do you make the nanoscale materials? Well, we have a platform for making nanoscale materials, and right now I have a student looking, for example, at the evolution of properties along the lanthanide series of the periodic table, looking at both optics and magnetic properties. Now, of course, if you can make and study this kind of properties, there are consequences. So we are also interested in applications of nanomaterials. We have, in fact, several coatings that we're playing with now to try to understand how we can push them, how far we can push them. Photocatalytic coatings that break down bacteria, and the most recent one is an anti-smog formulation based on nanomaterials. Water purification. Of course, we're still interested in biomaterials and biomolecules. We have specifically 2 projects, one in aggregation as related to disease, as well as we've always been interested in how you detect things related to diseases. Always looking at research with an eye to what does the world need? When I talk about market, it's not about money, it's about the need of the world. Therefore, when I say, okay, we have an antibacterial formulation, well, you can kill bacteria, but you know what? It has to be something in a way that is affordable for people, that will not kill people, and so on, okay? So, a lot of fundamental knowledge with an application that looks at the world. Okay, and so, as I said, this is now addressing the innovation gap, and that's the challenge. Oh, okay, forgot. The challenge is how to do this scalably, not just in my research lab. We've created 6 companies in my lab. We'll probably create more. But how do we do this in general? And that's what the Impact Center is about. And I'm only going to talk to you a little bit about the training we do for students. So it's not many years ago now, maybe about 10 years ago, when I realized that the universities and the government were pushing faculty to build companies and to patents. And I used to say, when would I do that? I'm already busy writing papers, writing grant proposals, supervising students, teaching, etc. I don't have time to build a company. But how does knowledge go out of my lab? And then it hit me that it's really the student, not the professor, who would be the appropriate conduit of that knowledge migration. Because the students are, they're young, they have energy, and most of all, they don't have all the other things that I'm doing. They're looking forward to having a job or creating their own job. And so this is why in 2004, I think it was 2003, I'm sorry, I could be off by a year, I created this seminar series called An Introduction to Scientific Entrepreneurship. It was just an introduction. It was very interesting one, no credit, and I had 90 people attending this. And a lot of people said, they're like, what's wrong? You're turning all the scientists into businessmen. And I argued, no, I'm not. I'm expanding people's view of the world. So I asked one of my colleagues, do you have ideas that are of value to the world? And they said, well, of course I have ideas. Do you have time to pursue those ideas, considering you're also writing grant proposals and publishing papers? And he said, well, no, who has the time? So I said, well, why don't you train the students to actually do that? And so in that first course, I call it a course, it's a non-credit series. At the end of the year, I asked people, okay, why don't you apply everything you've learned, create a 10-minute pitch. I challenged the class. So there were 4 teams who rose to the challenge, and of those 4 teams, 2 are real companies. One of them is Vive, crop protection, and the second one is a laser company that's that has sales in the 7 figures. So it's not bad for somebody teaching a course on something she knows nothing about. Okay, I've had few experiences in that. But that is the course that when Mars opened, they asked if they can partner in that course, and now there's over 20,000 registered per year. Many companies have been built, but for me that's different already, because the focus there is not about students anymore. It's about people in outside world who has different kinds of experiences. So in 2010, we created a completely different program called Techno, which is different. This is for scientists and engineers who want to create technology-based businesses. And the emphasis on the program is about hands-on work with mentorship. In other words, you build a company by building it. Yeah, there's a few lectures, a few workshops, but it's actually about building it. And my team and I, and now I have a pretty reasonable sized team, will be there on hand, and we invite other people who we trust to actually help people talk and build their businesses. When I started it, people said, who will come? Well, the first year there was 12 teams that came, and out of them 10 startups came about. And now we have 112. We've been running this program every year. So The input, typically we take master's students or higher, just because they have a lot of experience already with science. But it's not that we have anything against undergrads. We have a few undergrads. It's just that typically I would push an undergrad to learn the science first, because your core value, your competitive edge is about the fact that you know your science or your engineering. And then you can acquire the business acumen that you will need later. The output that we have here are high-tech companies, and then we provide them with whatever assistance they need. We call this a business a la carte model. We can do everything, helping people from simple things like their websites to how do they, where is the funding? We don't have money. So the first question you ask, what money do we give them? Nothing. I have no money. The university doesn't even give me money. Okay, so, but how do you raise money then? Well, there are things to know about that. All the way to helping them understand financial. We provide maybe an office or lab space as needed, etc. So what we did is we took apart one of our laser labs and turned it into company row. So that's it. Every company just get one little cubicle. When in 2012 we have too many students in there, this is getting really a fire hazard. The university gave us a little bit more space. And now we have a bit of space where we have shared rooms, we have meeting room, and we have a wet lab, we have electronics and machining. So the goal here is to be able to go all the way to market trials. We have injection molding, we have vacuum forming built by one of our people. And so we can create things that can go to trials. Our model is bootstrapping, that is to say, just go ahead and try to get to see if anybody will buy your product. Because then if people will buy your product, then you feel better about moving it on further. Okay, so just to show you examples of our product, and we will see if we can make this run.
My name is Dr. Soleil. Our company is called Soapbox Robotics, and our impact is we're opening access to technology for early childhood education.
My name is Dave. I'm with TabTrack, and our impact is innovating solutions with contactless technology. I'm Jonathan Munk, and I'm with Sojourn Labs, and our impact is better urban transportation.
I'm with Dimensions. Our impact is to facilitate the commercialization of new scientific innovations.
My name is Elisa Gal, and I'm with the Cellulose Machine Inc. And our impact is enabling higher productivity and lower costs for better machine vision in manufacturing and automation.
My name is Catherine Sepp, and I'm with Oxalis Pharmaceuticals. Our impact is to develop therapeutics that slow, halt, or reverse the course of neurodegenerative disease. I'm the founder of Multimension, and my impact is empowering people with healthcare knowledge. I'm with Nexogen, and my impact is transforming cutting-edge surgical technologies into simple and affordable products for the developing world.
And I'm a co-founder of Pueblo Science. My impact is advancing science education in low-resource communities around the world.
Hi, my name is Aurel Kappas, and I'm from Acoustics, and we're improving the outcome of cancer therapy.
Our impact is to deliver a clear and a clean world by the coating technology we have developed in Cynthia.
Michael Montgomery, Connecticut. My impact is building buildings safer and more resilient to natural disasters.
My name is Sally Crookston. I'm with Nature's Infinity Inc. And our impact is to replace plastic with biodegradable materials and reduce the carbon footprint.
My name is Mian. I'm the co-founder of Technologies, and our impact is to modernize how electronics are taught in schools.
So my name is Kermit, and I'm from Shower, and our impact is eliminating shower wastage through technology.
My name is Adam McGinty. I work for Seneca, and my impact is creating greener chemical technologies.
So my name is Brian, and my company is the Sense Intelligent Corporation. My company is trying to help deaf children to learn how to speak accurately.
So SJ&A tries to take your product idea concepts and build a physical prototypes of it, and then help you bring it to, I guess, in the first phase of commercialization.
Hi, my name is Ben Liu. My company is Immersive Incorporated, and our impact will be that we'll improve the living experience of visually impaired individuals worldwide.
My name is Jordan Inglas, and I'm with Vive. We make pesticides better and more effective for farmers.
technology-free solutions. Our impact is to create a better world where it's allergen-free for people who have food allergies.
Hi, my name is Martin. I am from Reclabs. My impact is simpler devices for people to interact with computers.
My name is Chris Pettigrew. I'm from Cytospan Technologies, and my impact is facilitating research into the mechanisms of aging and aging-associated diseases.
I'm the co-founder and CEO of PathCore. We try to improve the impact and accuracy of disease diagnosis for pathology.
The current product is Stick-Ups, a small paste candy that you take while you're hiccuping to stop the hiccups.
And the company is Sound Options Tinnitus Treatments, and our impact is treating tinnitus for tinnitus sufferers around the world.
Hi, my name is Mike Moore. I'm from Equifax Medical, and we're revolutionizing cancer detection.
My name is Scott McCauley. I'm the co-founder of Lunanos Inc., and my impact is keeping hospitals clean. I'm the founder of Spinesonics Medical, and we basically build ultrasound navigation devices for spine surgeons to perform a better job on patients. My company is Collagen, and my impact is better medicines faster.
I'm the co-founder of IamSick.ca, and my impact is helping Canadians access healthcare.
My name is Marty Avina. My company is Interoptics Augmented Reality, and my impact is improving performance and reducing human error.
So my name is Kyle Plumper, and I work for Diffractive, and we're helping people mobilize through early rehabilitation.
Okay. So I just wanted to give you an idea of the range and the kind of projects that the students have. A number of those companies have graduated already from our units, but most of them are still in the process of trying to figure out how they're going to market. As I said, we don't have any funding, but we work very hard with each one of these companies to understand what they really are and how they can access any kind of funding. So for example, a number of them are working on technology that are related to global health issues, in part because we had sat down with everybody to try to brainstorm how we can tap into Grand Challenges Canada funding and create value for low resource settings. And out of that, we have 17 projects funded by Grand Challenges Canada, which is quite pretty good money for the companies to really build their products. We supervise all of these companies the way I would supervise my research lab, right? So we're not a typical mentor where you just basically, where the companies have to find a mentor, and if they disappear, then the mentor doesn't know what's happened to them. No, we are very much actively participating in the building of these companies, so that we're very opportunistic. When we see a particular thing that will be useful to one of our companies, we create the connection. So anyway, that's a number of these companies are also not from U of T, because when we do our summer training program, what gets me excited is to see students who are passionate about something. And so we have people who have come as far west as Saskatchewan, north from Memorial, McGill, and this summer we have somebody from the Philippines. And we're redoing the way we do this training program. We now have 5 years of operation, times have changed. So we're interested in changing the way we teach to make more sense within the current environment. So anyway, I just want to wrap up by really letting you understand that I think it's a responsibility of scientists to be somehow involved in the commercialization process to bring value to the world. Doesn't mean that every scientist should build a company, but the way to hasten the path to creating value is by the involvement of the inventor. Certainly my experience with Excella is if I and my team were not involved actively for years after that company was built, it would have died any time. Because we were the expert. They hit a snag and we realized, no, we can solve that. We actually know how to redo all the physics and change the chemistry and so on to create a product that can address the needs of the world. So I'd like to just leave you with the tagline from the Impact Center. Our impact is bringing science to society. So thank you for your attention.
Hi, Cynthia. Thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. I could seriously monopolize your entire Q&A session, but I'll try to keep this short. So for those of us who are working at the University of Waterloo in our student entrepreneurship community through Velocity and other initiatives, one of the areas where we don't typically focus right now, but maybe we could based on your model, is getting more professor engagement. So how do you structure, no, because Rachel, who's one of our Velocity Science students from the Sun Care team, she and I were discussing this on the walk over, saying how do we get the great ideas that aren't being used in the professors' labs into student hands?
Okay, well, a few things. Okay, first of all, don't force the professor to do what they don't want to do. I mean, I think the key to really making everybody work is to understand what motivates them. I mean, so some professors will just not be motivated by it, and that's fine. But this is why I try to preach all the time. It's your responsibility. Having said that, people have a priority list on what they will devote their time on. So certainly the students are in the professor's lab know as much as the professor, probably more. Actually, I like dealing with the students because they will tell you that, oh yeah, this thing looks really good on the paper, but it only worked 50% of the time. Well, if it's 50% of the time, you cannot have a commercial product. Just forget it. Whereas the professor might be much more forward-looking and saying, oh yeah, I mean, we can get it to work. Maybe not. So I'd say go through the students because they know as much. Then once in a while, you'll meet some professors who are interested. You have to maximize the time with them. I mean, they may only have 10 minutes, so you better be prepared about, what's the question for 10 minutes. They don't have to be involved in the whole works. Having said that, when it works, it really works. So Kinetica, the guy with the tall building, just imagine how hard it is to actually get your product into a skyscraper. So we worked with him for 3 years, but the most important thing is the professor there worked with him because he provided credibility. And now that building is going up. The first installation is going up north of College on Yonge. It was awesome that, he said to me, some people with a civil engineering thesis, the theses are there in the library and they're wonderful ideas, but they never get to market. My thesis is going to be in that building. I mean, it's awesome.
I gleaned from your talk that the research labs are now a primary starting point for new startup companies and so on. I sometimes think about Apple and how it was started in a garage by 2 people, and at that time the 8-bit microprocessor had just come into the world, and it was it was not really used very much. But then that one invention started the whole personal computer industry. What I'm wondering about is basically, has the era of the garage-based startup passed, and that there's not much chances of transformative innovations coming from that sphere anymore?
No, I don't think that's what I'm saying. I mean, I think certainly there are people out there who are wonderful and outside the university and can do things in their garage. But I think within what exists, right? So they could create Apple based on the fact that there are microprocessors that they can buy the semiconductors. Right? But what you needed is the people who actually did the semiconductor physics to do that. So yes, there is certainly room for people to create innovation everywhere. All I'm basically having to make a point there is that there is a big case to be made for why basic science is important. In that if you're looking at long-term competitive edge, really is about knowledge. And so, but not to diminish the power of the home inventors. I know some people who are wonderful at doing things in their home. Now, the other thing I would actually like to add to that is, when I say research results, I don't mean actually necessarily your thesis. Because a lot of our companies, actually 70% of our students are doing work that are not their thesis. But what the thesis does is gives you additional knowledge that if you knew what the world needs, you can create the technology and the product. Right? So typically your thesis is good for publication, but it's not. So again, related to the question about professors, so the professor's publication may not be what you need. What you need is the fact that you can ask him a question: which polymer do you think will be useful for this thing? And that's what the 3-minute question is probably a good thing if you direct it into the, about the knowledge and not about commercializing the actual research result.
Sure. Hi, Cynthia. It's Alan Frank here from the Nano Institute.
Hi.
The question I have is, how do you institutionalize entrepreneurship in an academic setting like Toronto or Waterloo Or alternatively, what is the challenge in doing that? What challenges did you face from 2004 till today to try to bring entrepreneurship into the academic fold?
It's an interesting question. Of course, life is full of challenges, and you can always concentrate on the challenges. There's funding, there's space, there's all these things. But I don't really believe that you should have thousands of entrepreneurs. We can't really support thousands of companies. And that's why when people ask me about how do I scale up, we take about 15 to 20 companies per year. I think, the most I would do is scale it up to maybe 25 to 30. But what I want is improving the quality. So what we had done, I guess I didn't, for some reason I must have chosen the wrong PowerPoint. We are making it institutionalized by expanding the base. So we started offering 2 years ago an undergraduate course on Introduction to Innovation and Entrepreneurship, just to raise awareness, and this is for the Faculty of Arts and Science. You're in engineering, I think you have more access to this kind of either courses or seminars. In arts and science, it's very purist. So the introduction course, to get people to understand what is innovation and what is research and how it becomes innovation, and then a few skills that are entrepreneurial. It's really an awareness campaign. And that class is about 400 some students. And then we instituted another course, which is an internship at a startup. So students can then intern in some of our startup companies to build that ecosystem, so that later when they start thinking of building a company, they already have some idea. What does a startup look like, really? And what are the challenges of a startup? Because it's not for everyone. However, entrepreneurship skills are for everyone. Because there's a lot of skills that are really good about being an entrepreneur, and that's what I'm trying to broaden among the undergrads that we have. And then some of them can start thinking about their passion and their ideas and so on. But it's a little bit at a time. I don't really think one should just make everybody be an entrepreneur.
Opportunity just about just a couple of comments. I think it was good that you point out to the students that to get the stage where you are directed into society, you have to have some very good grounding in the science, of course. And I'm sure you didn't intend to do this, but I have a feeling some of the students may think it's not so important to be grounded into science. It's important. The important thing, though, as you know, Craig Venter, who was the guy who developed, was decipher the human genome, beat all these very, very, very funded initiative like the government of the US. And he said that do these things, you have to have, and I think you pointed this out indirectly, you've got to have multidisciplinary approach, and you've got to collaborative work. So that's the way he explained why he beat the American federal government. About collaborating, like you, I know quite a few Nobel Prize winners. They are not, of the 5 that I know, they are not millionaires, but they enjoy the science, as you were explaining. And the way they got to explain to me how they got to these innovative ideas, Don Glaser at UC Berkeley, he was drinking beer with his grad students. And why the bubbles are going to the beer, he got this incredible idea for the cloud chambers. So why he got the Nobel Prize for that. And of course, he thanked the grad students very much for having beer with them. Ham Smith, Johns Hopkins, another Nobel Prize winner, a biochemist, as you know. He developed the mutagenesis. I asked him, Ham, I heard what Don said, how did you do this? He said, in those days, we didn't talk with engineers. I decided I'm going to start talking with engineers. They were able to take my data and get me the results tomorrow, while the other guys all over the world, they're waiting for the analysis of this. So, as I said, just excuse me for some comments. I'm old enough to,
right. No,
to want to say for the students, some sharing my experience from some of these entrepreneurial initiatives.
Sure. So collaboration is certainly important, but it's not something you can force, right? However, if you look at our unit, so the good thing now about, I have space. And we are probably the only space in the university where you have a chemist, a physicist, an electrical engineer, a civil engineer, a computer scientist. Now we have forestry, dentistry. We have people from many disciplines, and now they're joined by social science students because of our internship program. We have a unit where people talk across boundaries. And the students have commented about it, that it's really great when you're sitting there and you get stuck and you turn to somebody and say, have you ever seen something like this? And collaboration became really normal because these are people with the same goals, and we try to make it a very collaborative. I'm against competition from each other. The competition really is our survival, so that's certainly very important there. Now, with regards to Nobel Prize winning ideas, I dream small. I'm not that good to think about, what the Nobel Prize winning idea is. I try to tell our students, if you dream big enough, you will never do it, because you get too intimidated. So maybe I'm just not ambitious enough. I'm very Canadian. But I want to dream small enough so I can get it to market now. Because your first idea is not going to be your last. Just get it in there, learn from it, and then do it again. And the next one will be bigger. And then when you really know, when you get your really big idea, you know how to bring it to the world. I feel really bad that my first idea was my beautiful diffractive optics biosensor. Oh my gosh, I gave that away. But that's okay. I got another one that was actually probably even more impact. But, just do it. Actually, if I have to summarize everything, okay, this is a plug now. Nike, just do it. Right. Yeah.
Okay, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I thank you for your attention, and let's show our appreciation to Cynthia.